Hello. Thank you all for listening to this. Something I need to address before I really get to the meat of this is that, Sally gave the game away, but I'm an introvert. And you might ask, what is an introvert doing on stage? And I don't blame you for wondering, or even thinking that I'm telling porkies. Because if you've heard the term introvert before, you might think of somebody who is shy, quiet, and maybe a bit of a hermit. And while that can be true for some introverts, it isn't actually the defining factor of what makes somebody an introvert. Extroverts can be shy and quiet too. So what is an introvert by my standard? And I'd like to introduce you to the definition coined by Carl Jung. So an introvert might be somebody who gets their energy from being alone and kind of recuperates when they're by themselves. But it could also be somebody who processes information deeply, using the long-term memory more than working memory. And that's kind of what makes introverts often better at expressing themselves through writing and rather than like off-the-cuff speaking. Hence my little teleprompter here. So let's look at that first characteristic of introverts. We thrive when we're alone. And indeed we do. It's why I left my stable 9 to 5 back in 2013. I was basically in an open plan office space, BBC Six, raging all day long, and it just exhausted me. And to this day, I still pretty much refuse to work in a job that makes me be around people all day long, bright lights, all of that. But that doesn't mean that we thrive by being alone all the time. And it doesn't mean that we thrive when we feel lonely, because we do get lonely too. And I've experienced this. I lived alone for over a year when I first moved to Brighton. And at times I really struggled. We are all social creatures at heart, and each and every one of us has it hardwired into us from our ancestors, who knew that in order to survive, they'd need people around them. So when I went freelance and started my own design and illustration business back in 2013, hence the pet portraits and everything else I experimented with, my theory was that the internet would be enough to keep me connected to my friends and family and potential clients and customers. They would just find me on my website. And for a while, this kind of worked. I had a small pool of clients in London, and that kept me going for a few years. But this completely collapsed in the first few months of living alone in Brighton. Inquiries just dried up. My London clients had either moved on or didn't want a remote worker. I think they were just jealous because I now live by the sea. And basically all my friends and family, they were a train ride away, which wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't Southern ruling the railway. So what I would do, and like I said, I would start to experiment basically a bit with people. And this wasn't easy. And even though I said introverts aren't necessarily shy or quiet, I'm still awkward as hell. And I don't exactly work a room when I'm at a networking event. I much prefer small groups, ideally set up so we can have one-to-one conversations and a pretty strict time limit. So anything longer than a few hours and I will start to fade. It's kind of like being an introvert Cinderella. And if you're an introvert, you'll have had the same experience. You're at an event, you just got into a really great groove with somebody, having a great conversation, and then smack, it hits you. And the thought of spending another half hour anywhere other than bed is really unappealing. But because I've had some dodgy networking experiences before, it was really hard for me to make myself get out and meet new people. I'd sign up for things, attempt to go to meetups, but I'd bail at the last minute. So I got so frustrated with myself that I started my own meetup group. And because it was mine, I couldn't not go. So I could also shape it to make it suit my weird introvert needs. I'm an early bird, so I made sure it was in the morning, 11, so late enough that the extroverts would just about be tempted enough to come out too, and the night owls as well. And because of my Cinderella-like time limit, made sure it lasted only 2 hours. I also didn't want to force anyone to do anything they didn't want to do. They didn't have to introduce themselves if they didn't want to, or do any ridiculous exercises to get to know each other. You could just come, bring your work, this is for working on creative projects, and have a chat if you wanted. And through this group, I met others. In fact, pretty much all of my friends in Brighton stemmed in some way from this one group. And it led me to find my collaborator, my partner in crime, Taya Anderson, who's spoken here before. And together we organised a 2-day live event last year called Wildfire Women, which some of you might have heard of. And arguably this is the least introvert-friendly thing I could have ever done, but it taught me so much. It taught me that the ultimate catalyst to creativity and generally making stuff happen is collaboration. And even when I had a minor freak out at the idea of even working together in person with somebody again, I discovered that actually when the right people get together, you bring out the best in one another. In addition, I learned that I have this incredible supportive creative community right on my doorstep, which thankfully helped me connect with clients and get my cash flow looking healthy again. Which brings me on to tonight's theme for me, community. Connecting to a community is very different from spending time with friends and loved ones, which I'm all for spending time with people I love one-to-one. It means I can devote my full attention to them, I can listen to them intently, without being distracted by several other conversations going on in the background. So why would introverts need community if we're so great at one-on-one singular relationships? Well, according to Emily White, author of Count Me In, we're increasingly losing our sense of the collective self. Instead, we're choosing to focus on ourselves and private relationships. And increasingly, these connections are happening online and staying there. They're not entering the real world. And investing only in these limits our experience of humanity. So, a little quote from her, what you don't get is novelty. You don't get to meet people who aren't like you, and you don't get to meet people who really challenge you to be different. And people can get into a rut socially. And there are other unexpected benefits I've seen from tapping into this creative community here in Brighton. Number one, accountability. So having somewhere to go on a regular basis and work on a collaborative project or just report in on a solo project to somebody in real life is powerful, and it will really keep you on track. And I saw this happen in my own meetup group, Creative Cafe, which I believe still happens in El Campo Lounge on a Saturday at 11 a.m. So if you're someone who has a hard time finishing what you start or motivating yourself, the accountability you get in a group is unlike anything else. Number two, feedback. And I must say, I love my friends and family, but I can't exactly depend on them for unbiased feedback on my creative work. And if you're writing a book or making music or even setting up a business, at some point you need outside feedback from a group of people who aren't too close to worry about offending you. So a critical group of like minds is well worth it, having, if you want to take things to the next level. And number three is the leverage of the mastermind. I have no better way of describing this. And if anyone here isn't familiar with the idea of a mastermind, and not the one with John Humphreys, I'll explain. So the idea of a mastermind was first coined by Napoleon Hill back in the 1920s, who described it as the coordination of knowledge and effort of two or more people who work together towards a definite purpose in the spirit of harmony. Basically, the benefit that I love most, but I find hardest to wrap my head around just because it's where my practical left brain approach just has to go away. It's just the magic that happens in a mastermind. The magic when two or more minds combine forces. Ideas that could never have been birthed alone seem to come out. Solutions form to problems that you've been spending weeks or months ruminating over. So the leverage that I got from a mastermind or just a community is something that I recommend everyone embracing, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. So what does a community look like for introverts? Well, it looks like being part of a collective, whether it's a church, a political meetup group, a crafts class, a yoga class, something like this, where we're at, whilst protecting your energy. And if you're an introvert and you are looking to feel a bit more included and connected, here are some tips. So number one, if you're at a more extrovert community event, take your time. We sometimes put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get in with a group rapidly. And the truth is, this stuff takes time. Integrating with the community doesn't happen from going to one class or one event. And it's why regular events are so useful. Thank you, Sally, for this. And why religious or spiritual communities are so strong. They're consistently ingrained in the community's calendar. So when we're looking for a community you might want to get involved with, you need to find out how regular the meetings are, whether or not you can realistically commit, and knowing that more than one attendance will be a massive benefit. Tip 2, go to classes and events that cater to introverts. So you don't have to go to extrovert-centric networking events. Meetup.com is a great way to meet people, especially if you're prone to go into monk mode. So in addition, you can run your own. When you run the show, you kind of have to be there, like I had to go to Creative Cafe. So if you have a tough time, just start your own. And to make sure they're introvert friendly, think about things like how long it lasts, how many people can come, stuff like that. And number 3 is set yourself some boundaries. If your community becomes a burden or feels stifling, then an introvert, or anyone for that matter, needs to withdraw and set up some firm boundaries. My boundaries around the Saturday morning meetup were primarily about the time, knowing my own energy and when it's at its peak, when I should go, and not staying a second longer if I felt drained. So just knowing your own energy budget and the activities that light you up, whether it's being alone or with others, that's key for being in a community. And much like comfort zones, we kind of need to push ourselves, but not expand them too much so they kind of burst. And I know, for example, that 2 days of social activities in a row will max me out, but so will 2 or 3 days of just being alone will make me feel equally drained. So it's getting this kind of sweet spot. So the other thing is collaboration. So magic happens when more than one mind focuses on something. And I won't keep beating this to death, but I really can't stress enough the difference having somebody else to collaborate with makes. And I would never have been able to put on that 2-day live event without Taya and all of the people we met along the way who helped us out on the day and spoke and did workshops. And this is a bit of a, well, we can do this, the shameless self-plug, but we are going to do another Wildfire Women event happening this October. We'll talk about that. Hey. And finally, just remember that you don't have to go it alone. If it helps you to warm up, then bring a friend to that at least the first time you go to an event. And even if you spend most of your time talking to that one person on that first event, that's okay. Be easy on yourself and set yourself the goal of next time, maybe only talking to them for the first 10 minutes, and maybe the next time you go alone. The point of all of this is to say, yes, introverts need people too, and feeling part of a community does not mean having to become an extrovert, though I won't be held responsible for any extroverted side effects that happens as a result of this. Thank you.